In 1955, a young rebel from Missouri was about to change the history of music. What he didn't know was that on that same day, his downfall would also begin. This is the story of how Chuck Berry became the king of rock and roll, and how, for reasons few dare to tell, the music industry decided to hand the crown to someone else. Let's begin. Chuck Berry, born Charles Edward Anderson Berry on October 18, 1926, grew up in a middle-class home in St. Louis, Missouri. His mother, Martha, a teacher, and his father, Henry, a contractor and Baptist deacon, instilled in him the values of a working-class family. From childhood, Berry was exposed to a variety of musical genres, including blues, country, boogie-woogie, and swing. As a result, the young Berry began to show a passionate love for music, playing the guitar and participating in local church choirs. Later in the video, I will tell you why this was extremely important for Chuck Berry's music. But Berry's life would begin to get complicated, facing many challenges due to his rebellious personality and bad friendships. In 1944, at the age of 18, Berry and two friends robbed 3 stores and stole a car during a trip to Kansas City, using a gun they had found. For this, he was arrested and convicted of armed robbery. Berry was sentenced to 10 years in prison, 3 of which he served in a juvenile reformatory. During his time in prison, music became his refuge, keeping him motivated to regain his freedom. At this point, Berry was already beginning to imagine a new life devoted entirely to his passion. However, upon his release, Chuck Berry faced a complicated reality, full of problems and financial difficulties that would follow him for a long time. After his release, Berry faced the difficult task of earning a living, but he didn't sit idly by. He first worked as a janitor, then as a stylist, photographer, and even a carpenter, all to support his family. Right here, Berry seemed to have left his rebellious life behind. But this rebelliousness would never lie dormant. Instead, it would later become the raw material for his songs and the very essence of what would come to be known as rock and roll. Meanwhile, he never abandoned his passion for music, as he also played at parties and nightclubs to make a name for himself in the music scene of the time. In 1953, he joined the Sir John's Trio, led by pianist Johnny Johnson, and they began playing at the popular Cosmopolitan Club in St. Louis. Berry was invited to replace one of the group's members, and it was at that point that he began to propose new songs and new sounds, combining all the influences that had accompanied him since childhood, the result of his life in St. Louis, Missouri. His style mixed rhythm and blues with touches of country, creating a unique and fresh sound that no one had heard before. Up to this point, Johnny Johnson was Chuck Berry's gateway to the music world, and Berry would be eternally grateful to him. However, remember Johnny Johnson's name well, because sometimes those who help you in the beginning don't always want to see you succeed, as we will see later in this story. The Sir John's Trio, which Chuck Berry joined in early 1953, began to gain popularity thanks to Berry's charismatic presence, leading to a name change to the Chuck Berry combo, with Berry as the undisputed center of attention in the band. But Berry aspired to reach higher, and to do so he wanted to record his songs in which he captured his entire vision of how rock and roll should sound, so he needed to connect with a record label, as we will see below. Chuck Berry's new rock sound was gaining ground, but it was in 1955 when it reached an unexpected level. He traveled to Chicago and met the legendary Muddy Waters, who introduced him to Leonard Chess, owner of Chess Records. Leonard Chess listened to Berry's recordings and fell completely in love with his sound, offering him a record deal, which Berry accepted without hesitation. This led to the production of the song Maybelline, a revamped version of the country classic Ida Red, but with the raw energy of Berry's guitar and voice. The result was a huge hit, selling over 1 million copies. In this way, Berry became the first African-American artist to achieve unprecedented success. Maybelline reached number 5 on the US charts, breaking a significant racial barrier at the time by being one of the first songs by an African-American artist to succeed in a genre dominated by white audiences. In June 1956, he released Roll Over Beethoven, a song that reaffirmed his position as a leading figure in rock. In May 1957, he released his first studio album, After School Session, which included several of his greatest hits such as Too Much Monkey Business and School Days, thus strongly consolidating his presence on the music scene.
Too much monkey business. Up in the morning and out to school.
Then, in April 1958, he released Johnny Be Good, a song that would become an immortal rock and roll classic. Chuck Berry's rebelliousness not only defined his personality, but also shaped the DNA of rock and roll. His iconic duck walk, that one-legged hop while playing guitar, broke with the rigidity of traditional bands and became a stage symbol later adopted by figures such as Angus Young of AC/DC. Berry didn't just play, he performed with boundless energy, connecting with a youth that identified with his lyrics about cars, love, and freedom. He was the first to encapsulate rock as an attitude, a rebellious cry, an electrifying party, and a form of independence. At that point, Chuck Berry was on top of the world. Every new single became a smash hit, and his presence on the scene was so dominant that many already called him the king of rock and roll. However, that title would not be well received by the music industry. With suspicion and resistance, the industry would soon find a way to strip him of that crown, as we will see below. Although Chuck Berry had earned the title of King of Rock and Roll and secured a privileged place in the world of rock, he faced a series of events that seriously threatened his reign. It should be remembered that although rock and roll burst onto American radio stations, racial barriers were still strong in the 1950s. Pop radio stations were reluctant to play African-American artists, so record labels sought an acceptable face for the new sound. The turning point came when RCA bought Elvis Presley's contract from Sun Records for $35,000, a record sum at the time, and launched an advertising campaign that immediately proclaimed him the king of rock and roll. The message was clear. The genre was being presented to white audiences through a white performer, while black pioneers such as Chuck Berry would remain confined to the more underground rhythm and blues circuits. Just as Berry was beginning to establish his fame, a second blow halted his rise. In December 1959, he was arrested for violating the Mann Act by transporting a minor for immoral purposes, and spent almost 2.5 years between trials and prison, 1959 to 1963. The tabloid press exploited the case, and radio stations removed him from their playlists, turning him into a controversial figure just as rock music was becoming international. This void coincided with the arrival of the British invasion. The Beatles and the Rolling Stones had grown up playing Chuck Berry songs such as Roll Over Beethoven and Johnny Be Good, and between 1963 and 1964, they brought those songs to millions of listeners who, paradoxically, associated them with the new British idols, rather than their original author. When Berry was released from prison, his repertoire was famous, but the media spotlight was already on the bands of the British invasion. And so, over the decades, the music industry and history seemed to have proclaimed Elvis as the new king of rock, and the British as its global ambassadors, leaving aside or minimizing the contribution of Chuck Berry and other African-American pioneers. After reaching the top, Chuck Berry began his decline. Legal controversies, convictions, and personal scandals gradually isolated him from the music industry. His time in prison made him more distant, and his refusal to rehearse with musicians led him to tour with low-quality local bands, damaging his reputation. In a landscape already dominated by the British invasion, he was left behind. And if that weren't enough, Remember pianist Johnny Johnson? Yes, the same one who invited him to join his band when Chuck Berry was a complete unknown. Well, Johnny Johnson ended up suing him for the authorship of some 50 songs, including No Particular Place to Go, Sweet Little 16, and Roll Over Beethoven. Johnson argued that the songs were composed by both of them, but only Berry was credited. But time, though relentless, also tends to restore some justice. Despite the shadows that surrounded his final years, musicians of all generations continued to see him as the architect of rock. John Lennon said that rock could have been called simply Chuck Berry, and Keith Richards revered him as an absolute master. The Beatles, the Rolling Stones, and even Elvis Presley absorbed his style and replicated it as if it were a sacred formula. That belated recognition began to take hold when, in 1986, Berry was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as one of its first members. Decades later, the Polar Prize once again put his name at the top. The industry that once ignored him now bowed to his legacy. It was the same world that had punished him, recognizing, albeit belatedly, that without him, rock simply would not exist. Sometimes, history only honors its pioneers when it's already too late, just like Chuck Berry, the man who taught the world how to move to the rhythm of a guitar. But the beauty of rock is that it never forgets. Its stories keep coming back, louder, brighter, eternal. And in our next chapter, we'll travel to the neon heart of the 1980s, a time when one British band, almost by accident, wrote a song that would echo across generations. A single track that turned the outfield from complete unknowns into one-hit legends loved around the world. Click on the next video, and I'll be waiting for you there, my rock friend.